Welcome to Live DAF, your online DAF Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's DAF Hayomi Maseches KIDDUSHIN DAF Yud Gimel. We are actually up to the 15th line from the top of the Amud, beginning with a story. Says the Gemara, Hahi Itisa, there was this woman, Dahava Kamaz B'navar Shechesh. She was standing and selling these silk bands, silk, belts. Osa Hahu Gavra. This fellow comes along, and without prior warning, Chataf Varsha Chamina. He grabs one of these items. Amrle, so she calls back to him, give it back. Havani Ali, can I please have my merchandise back? Amrlo, he tells her, look, not a very nice fellow, I have a deal for you. If I return it to you, will you be willing to become mekudesh to me? Shakla say, Vishtika. So she takes it back. He returns it, he takes it back. And she remains silent. Doesn't express objection. Doesn't turn him down. But nor does she necessarily consent to this outrageous offer. She just takes it back in silence. V'amar Rav Nachman. So Rav Nachman says, nothing doing. She can simply respond by saying, look, she can claim that she never really okayed this kiddushin in Shakli. Of course, I took it. Vididi Shakli, but it was my thing that I took back. He didn't give me anything. There's no kiddushin. So even though she remained silent, she felt no need to object because she knows it's her thing. So basically, that's Rav Nachman's chiddush. Even though there was silence in response to his offer, which would perhaps provide some indication of, that she's going along with it, that she's cooperating, but she can claim otherwise. It was my thing that I took back. Eisvei Rava Rav Nachman. So Rava has a kasha. The Brisa says, Kitcha begezel. If a man chose to be mekadesh an isha with an item that he stole from her, uvechamas, or something that he forcibly bought from her, uvegneva, or something that he stole, not in her presence. For instance, he grabbed money from her, and used it to be mekadesh or mikudesh, as it works, despite the fact that he didn't really give her anything of his own. It was her thing to begin with. And here we say, Rav Nachman says, it's a worthless proposition. Answers the Gemara. There's a difference between the two cases. Hasam, that brisa, that it doesn't work, is speaking Hasam. Yeah, the brisa there that it does work, right? It does work. B'dishadach is speaking that there was some prior discussion between this potential couple. B'dishadach is a lashon of shidduchim. There was some sort of arrangement. They had discussed their upcoming kiddushin, so it was expected, it was anticipated, and therefore the kiddushin holds. And the question still, is, but still, after all, it's her item. He didn't spend anything on it. So the Rosh addresses it. He says, look, the fact that she's going along with it, and this is after they've already discussed kiddushin, and he sort of snatches it and give it back to her. It's like a like a playful act. He took it and used it for kiddushin, and she knows, she's aware, and she's willing, she's going along with it, she's cooperating, she's happy to get engaged to him, so she understands, says the Rosh, in order for this to work, she has to actually be moichel him. She has to sort of relinquish her ownership, give it away to him. So now it's really his. And when he gives it to her, it's his offering, it's his item being used for her kiddushin. So it's an assumption. Like a non-sade, we just assume that she's a willing partner to the deal. So despite the fact that it was her item that he took, it can work as her kiddushin. I happen to know a first-hand story of a marriage, of a chasna, where the fellow shows up to the chuppah, and he's looking up and down for the ring, it's nowhere to be found. So the Mirsader Kiddushin, who happened to be Rav Yitzchak Soloveitchik, turned to one of the relatives, one of the women relatives, and they asked her to please loan a ring of hers to the chas and kala, and it was used for kiddushin. And the Rush brings this halacha as well. He says that can also work, despite the fact that it wasn't really his ring, he borrowed it. That's also considered his for the moment, and he gave it to her for Kiddushin. That also works. So here comes a Chiddush again. You took something forcibly, you stole it, Gezel, but you gave it back to her, and this was after they had already discussed Kiddushin. There was Shadich, there was Shidduchin. Rashi says, Shadir baba koidim lochein v'nesratzis le'eskadish loy. Right? So over there we say the shtika is tantamount to acknowledgement. Mishum tenicha lahu, she's a willing partner. But if there was no prior discussion, it just came out of the blue as a surprise. In this case, even if she remains silent upon the return of her item, it's not a Kiddushin. Says the Gemara, how do you know this distinction? How do you know that the Shadich factor can change the whole equation? Umanot Taimra, the Shadilon bin Shadich or the Shadich, how do you know there's a difference between this and that? The Sanya, we have a Brisa, which is actually, this is part 2 of the Brisa, which we began learning yesterday at the bottom of Yud Beis Amud Beis. We had around 6-7 lines off the bottom. The Sanya Armala Kinsei Selazubi Pikadon. That was a story where he actually owed her money, right? He had borrowed money. Sorry, that was the case where he gave up Pikadon. Pikadon means for safekeeping. Okay, so he told her, look, take this Sela for Pikadon, and then he switched his plan. He switched the program on her. He says, look, this is for Kiddushin. So the Brisa says that if he said it in advance of actually handing her the money, b'shas matan mois, then mikudeshes. Whether she expressed willingness or even if she remained silent, it was a silent acknowledgement and it's Kiddushin. But once he gave her the money for Pikadon, well, then it depends. If she says okay, he gave it to her and then he says it's for Kiddushin, so Ratzah Sama Kodeshes, but otherwise not. So that was part A. Here comes part B of that same Brisa, the Sanya. Amar Lo, it's a similar but slightly different case. Amar Lo Kinsi Sela Zu Shani Chayiv L'chi. Here, he had borrowed money. He owed her money. So here he says, look, take this Sela, receive the Sela that I owe you. And then he turns around and he says, look, may as well use it for Kiddushin. Does it work? Well, it depends how quickly he made this turnaround. B'shas matan mois. If he said it as he's, handing her the money, so ratzah some kodeshes, lo ratzah enim kodeshes. If she says okay, it's fine, but if she's not willing, then it doesn't work. Lachar matan mois. But once he gave her that money, it's already hers. It's repayment for that loan. It's gone. It's hers. You see, it's worse than the case of Pikadon, where the money is still. Bottom line is, it's still his. Even though he's depositing it with her, she's looking after it, but it's still his money, so he can still reprogram the deal. Can still redirect the money if she's willing to go along with that. But here, it's too late. Once he gave her the money, it's hers to keep. Money owed to her, right? So la'achar matan mois, afilu ratzah, even if she's willing, eina mekudeshes. Now, what is the precise definition of ratzah and loy ratzah? My ratzah or my lo ratzah? Does ratzah mean the amr in? She verbally acknowledged her willingness to accept it as Kiddushin, and loy ratzah means the amr loy, she vehemently turned him down. No. So then we'll have a deal. Let's imply from here. Let's infer ha'ishtika have a Kiddushin. But suppose she just remains silent, nor a yes nor a no. Then shtika is like shtika kaidah. She's going along with the offer. And the Brisa says, look, if this happened b'shas matan mois, as he's giving her the money, so he actually stated his new intentions before actually giving her the money in her hand. So if she's willing, okay, and if she remains silent, then it's also fine. Okay? Unless she actually turns him down, right? If she remains silent, it works. So the question is, v'nisni mukudeshes stam kiyasam. So then the Brisa should simply use, simple wording. Just say, if he turned around b'shas matan mois and he re-designated it as Kiddushin money, then it should work. Whether she's willing, whether she's quiet. Just as in the Reisha, the Brisa said, well, it's mukudeshes. Whether she's verbally accepting it or whether she just accepted it in silence is tantamount to her acquiescing to his offer. Right? There's no need to actually articulate that if she says no, it doesn't work. It's Pashat, Rashi says. She says a Lashon, She'af haktanim yoidim kain. Even youngsters know that the Isha is yelling and screaming, no, I don't want Kiddushin. Of course it doesn't work. There's no need for the Brisa to say it. So why does the Brisa just not pick a simple Lashon and say, look, here is the Sela that I owe you, B'shas matan mois. He said Kiddushin, it's Mekudesh. We understand whether she said okay, whether she was silent. Either way, it's okay, just like in the Reisha. So apparently, that's not what the Brisa meant. The fact that the Brisa has to articulate and make that differentiation between she said yeah, she said lo ratzasa, yeah ratzasa. There must be something more to it. Ella ratzasa da amra in. Apparently, when it says ratzasa means she says yes. Lo ratzasa means the ishtika, that she remained silent. And what does the Brisa say? Even in that case, it doesn't work. V'katani de'enim kodeshes. So again, he offered her money back for a loan that he owed her. It was repayment, which was now redesignated for Kiddushin. B'shas matan mois, says the Brisa, silence is worthless. She must actually verbally articulate her acceptance. Ratzasa means she says yes, then it works. L'ratzasa, which basically means she did not express, did not clearly articulate her intention, her acceptance. She simply was silent as she took it back. It doesn't work. My time. Why? Why is silence not equated with acceptance? In the case of the Pikadim, we said it is. But here it's not. You know why? Big difference. Here it's her money. She can just say, look, of course I took my money in silence. In Shakli, of course I took it. Vididi Shakli, it was mine. It was rightfully mine. I didn't have to provide any explanations. So what do we see? That when one hands the Isha money which is coming to her, and she takes it in silence, there's no Kiddushin. So now we have a big problem on our hands. We have that other Brisa. He was Mekadesh with Gezer, with Chamas, with Gneva, even though it's not his money. Oh, that's the key. Shidduch. Elolav Shmam. Apparently, there is a clear difference between the two cases. Hadar Shadich, Hadar Shadich. If there was prior discussion and she was expecting it, and she was playing along with it, so to speak, then we say, even though it was hers, she was Meichelim, as the Rush explains, in which case, acceptance in silence is okay. Whereas, in the Brisa, there was no Shadich. It came to her as a surprise, out of the blue. Here's the money I owe you. Oh, no, Kiddush. And she takes it quietly. There's no Kiddush. Okay, so that's the conclusion. Money coming to her, given as a Kiddushin. Depends. If she was expecting it, then we say that even Shtika is a silent concession, a silent acceptance, which basically means she's Mekadeshes, but if there's no Shadich factor, she could care less about what he's saying, and there's no Kiddushin. Continues the Gemara. Kinoch nafshe de Rav Asi. After Rav Asi passed away, Rav Asi taught many halachas, and they wanted to gather the halachas together, put them together so that they can bundle them up and remember them. So they had to make a little bit of a gathering between the Chachamim and try to figure out, see who can remember and relate halachas in his name, and they could organize it and remember it. They came together to gather and compile the halachas and the drashas and the lessons of Rav Asi. Amar lehu, hahumar rabbanim. So a certain Chacham, Rav Yaakov Shmei, with the name Rav Yaakov, turned to the other Chachamim. I have something from Rav Asi. Hachi Amar Rav Asi. Amar Rav Mani. Kashem she'ein ha'isha niknes b'shapachas m'shavet pruta. Just as we all know that the minimum requirement for Kiddushay Kesef by an Isha is Shave Pruta worth. Kach ein Karka Niknis Bachas Mishaver Pruta. The same applies to buying land. You can't go less than a Shave Pruta. Amrulay, so they asked him, Vahatanya, but the Brisa says, Afal Bishain, Isha Niknis Bachas Mishaver Pruta, even though by an Isha less than a Pruta is worthless, but Karka is Niknis Bachas Mishaver Pruta. Amrulay, so he responded, Kitanya Hi Bechalipin. That Brisa, which indicates that Karka can be purchased with less than a Pruta, we're not speaking about, it's not speaking about Kesef, it's talking about that swap, Kinyan, that Kinyan Chalipin. The Sanya, we have a Brisa, Koinen Bekli, that Chalipin can be accomplished using any sort of utensil, any sort of item, Vavo B'Shein B'Shavar Pruta, even though it doesn't have a Shavar Pruta in value. That's the halacha. So in terms of Chalipin, the swap system, that doesn't need a Shavar Pruta, but in terms of Kinyan Kesef, the minimum coin or equivalent must be a Pruta. Now Tesis has a kasha. The Gemara presents the equation as though, the starting point is the Isha, and just as the Isha needs a Pruta, the Karka needs a Pruta as well. But actually, the Gemara learns Kiddusha Kesef of Isha from where? From Karka. That was the whole drasha of Beis, from the field that Avram Avinu purchased from Ephraim. So the starting point should be Karka, and that should be the basis for Isha. Well, Taisus has two terutzim. Either we're going with the other drasha, v'yatzachinim ein kasav, back on Af Gimel, which has nothing to do with Karka, so the Isha has her own source, or, says Taisus, it is the practice, it's urche the Gemara, sometimes to highlight the bigger chiddush first. Just like an Isha needs a Shava Pruta, but it's actually a bigger chiddush because it doesn't have its own source. But that's the way of the Gemara to sort of introduce with the bigger chiddush. The Pnei Yeshua seems to have a different approach. He says, if anything, you can say perhaps that Isha is going to provide our source because, the story of Ephraim involved a non-Jew, and a non-Jew works differently. By them, even less than a Pruta has value. They're even particular about even less than a Pruta. We know that even when it comes to Gzela, right, by Yisrael, less than a Shavar Pruta is not reckoned, but by a Goyers. So Bnei Yeshua wonders that perhaps the kinyan of Karka from a non-Jew can be perhaps with less than a Pruta as well. So how do we know that it's true that a Pruta is needed by Yisrael who buys Karka? That's why we go to Isha. That's why we need Isha. You see, remember Rashi, and Gimel Beis, the way we have the Gerson in the Gemara, Rashi learned that Isha b'poches mishavar Pruta le'miknaya nafsha. That was on top of Gimel Beis, the first line. And Rashi says the Gnai Hula. It's unbecoming to her. It's unfitting for the Isha. She doesn't want to go for less than a Pruta, right? It's degrading for her. So Rashi learns that the makar, the source for the din of Pruta by the Isha, how do you know you can't go less? Is because the Isha wouldn't go less than a Shava Pruta. So according to Rashi, it's beautiful. The Gemara's starting point is in fact Isha. Just like an Isha needs a minimum of a Pruta, likewise Kinyan Karka. Okay, continues the Gemara. So they were compiling halachos from Rav Asi. Here comes another lesson from Rav Asi. Hada Riasvi v'ka'amri, so they were sitting and talking. Hada Amar Vidam Ashmo. Kol she'eni yedei b'gitin v'kiddushin. That a fellow who's not proficient, fully expert in halachos of get and kiddushin, lo yeiloi esak mimoin, he shouldn't be involved in these things. By the way, the Marsha asks why the Gemara mentions get before kiddushin. Typically, it's kiddushin that precedes the get. So there are several answers. First of all, that's how we have it in the Gemara. Gittin comes before kiddushin, and the Rambam says because in the Psukim they're organized that way. But he says another interesting insight. He says, Gittin are more complicated. There are so many more intricacies and halachas when it comes to Gittin, and that's why the Gemara stresses that involvement in Gittin, need real experts. But when it comes to Kiddushin, he says not necessarily do we need the greatest world's expert, because the halachas are fairly straight away and fairly straightforward. So the stress is more on Gittin. Another angle, says the Marsha, is that the Gemara is speaking about a Kiddushin that follows a get, so it's her second marriage. When an Isha remarries, so a fellow who's involved in that must really be an expert to confirm, to ascertain that her get from her previous husband is a valid, effective get. And for that you need a professional. So anybody who's not up to par, lo yehei lo esek imimayin, should not be involved in these activities. Amar Vasi, Amar Yechanan. It's actually very consequential. V'koshen lo'olam, those who engage, even though they're not really involved, not really proficient, they can cause a big mess and cause, an isha to remarry, even though she's still an Eishes Ish, and therefore they can bring catastrophe. Yoiser, v'koshen lo'olam yoiser midar hamabel, they can bring a worse catastrophe than the time of the Mabel. Shenemar, the pasuk in Hosea Perek Dalad pasuk Beis reads as follows: Allah, one who's involved in dishonesty and false oaths, v'chachesh, or denial, v'ratzayach, murder, v'ganaif, stealing, v'naif, znus, paratzu, or they're involved in giving birth from Eishes Ish, bringing about mamzerim, v'damim nago. What is that? We'll see in a minute. My mashma. So, how do we see from here that being involved with an Eishes Ish brings terrible catastrophe? Metargum Rav Yosef, who we know was blind, he used to be very involved in Targum. He used to learn and review the Nevi'im and Ksuvim in a Targum fashion, the way we have it from Yonis ibn Azil, because he, some explain this, Ritva says, because of his blindness, he couldn't actually read it inside, and there was a halacha they're not meant to learn Nevi'im Tanakh Baal Peh. Dvarim Shebaksav, they're meant to be read straight out of the text, so he was blind, he didn't have that ability, so he used to actually focus on the Targum, on the translation, and that's how he learned. So he was an expert in Targum, and his Targum on this pasuk of Paratzu is like this: Merlden bnin minashei chavreyon. Paratzu, says Rashi, is v'chein yifreitz, right, having children. So bringing about children from married women, so that's Eishes Ish. Chayven al chayven meisifin, they multiply their chayven, their guilt, their violations, their averes, uksiv. And the next pasuk there says, Al kain te'eval ha'aretz, that brings about mourning and destruction on the land, v'umlal kol ish v'ba, to all its inhabitants, b'chayes ha'soda, u'bay v'hashamayim, v'gam degei hayam ya'aseifu. Everybody experiences destruction, even the fish. V'lu b'der hamabel. However, when it comes to the der hamabel, although destruction on a very grand scale hit the earth in its totality, but not, the fish was spared. Only those that inhabited dry land was struck down, but not the fish. But when it comes to interfering with an Eishes Ish, so we see that it's a very risky business. Now, how do we know that only an Eishes Ish violation, that on its own can bring this consequence? Maybe, everything listed in the pasuk has to be violated as one package to bring about that terrible consequence. You can't entertain that notion, because we have a different pasuk in Yirmiyah. So we see that Allah violating an oath, that in itself brings about destruction. So we see that one in its own, each one independently carries that consequence. So back to that other pasuk, we assume that every violation, every avera mentioned there has the same power. Says the Gemara, 1 second. And maybe violating an oath, that's really terrible. We have a Gemara in Shavuos about it, that the whole world shakes. So it's a terrible, terrible violation. Maybe that stands alone. That brings about this destruction. But otherwise, the other items mentioned in the pasuk have to come together as a package to bring about this terrible destruction. How do we know that violating Eishes Ish can do it on its own? Miksiv uparatzu parzuksiv. Does the pasuk say uparatzu with a vav, which would sound like it's all together? It says paratzu, which indicates that the avera of Eishes Ish on its own, and likewise everything else mentioned in the pasuk, has the same consequence. So this was the second lesson from Rav Asi. Here comes number 3. Hadar Yasi v'kamri, was sitting and talking. Hadisnan. We have a Mishnah in Meseches Kinin. Ha'isha shevi chatas. We have an Isha who gave birth, a Yoledes, who's meant to bring 2 karbanos, chatas and an oila. So she already brought her chatas successfully. Umeis, she passed away. What happens to the oila? Yaviu yarshin oilasa, her descendants who inherit her property must complement her carbon. They have to bring the oila as well, even after her passing. because her assets have become obligated and committed to this cause. That's only provided she had already set aside the oila carbon while she was still alive. But otherwise, they're not obligated to bring the oila. Alma kasaber, apparently because he holds that shibud elav deiraisa, the whole concept of one's belongings being committed to repayment of his financial obligations. You know, we're accustomed to believe that when you borrow something, all your assets, all your properties are committed to the cause. Right? There's a lien, an automatic lien, hovering all over his properties. Which is true, but the question is this rooted in Da'iraisa? Is it a concept that we learn from the Torah? Just like we know that there's a concept of being an Arev. We know this from Yehuda. Yehuda was an Arev, guaranteeing Binyamin's return to his father Yaakov Avinu. So we learn the concept of Arev, a guarantor, from the Torah. But does that apply to every loan? And every lien? Shibud Elav Da'iraisa. No. In the Torah there's no concept of Shibud on one's nechasim, on one's properties. Unless he actually, drafts a document to that extent. I'm borrowing $1 million and everything that I own is now mishubah to you. Well, you can do what you want. You're willingly submitting to that lien, that's fine. But minat Torah, for instance, let's say it's an undocumented loan, a milva al peh. There's no shibud on his nechasim minat Torah. Likewise over here. She owes these karbanis, but now she passed away. That's it. There's no shibud that's applied. There's no lien that's applied to her assets. If she's not around, the Yershim don't have to fill in for her. They don't have to use those assets to pay her carbon. Amar Rav Asi, Amar Rav Yechanan, no, he disagrees. So there's another halach from Rav Asi. Afagav shalifrisha machayim. No, even if the Isha did not do this during her lifetime, her assets are committed to the cause. Alma kasavar shibud ha'avadarais. He holds that one's assets are bound to the repayment of his loans and his obligations, including his karbanis. So now they took over her assets. They must pay her obligations. So that's the Gemara. Bottom line is, we have a machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda who's quoting Shmuel, who says Shibud Elav Deiraisa, and Rav Asi is quoting Rabbi Yechanan, who says it is Deiraisa. Well, this is already has been discussed in the past. Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Shmuel both say that Shibud is not min haTorah. Milva al peh, a verbal loan, an undocumented loan, you can't collect that from Yershim or from people who bought properties after the loan was extended. No, there's no shibud min haTorah. That's Shmuel, right? Rav Yechanan, what does he hold? Rav Yechanan Shlakish, they both hold Amr Tavai Milva al peh. Yeah, so it's clear that there's a machlekes, and what's the point of repeating the same machlekes again? In the case of the Isha with a carbon, which is pretty much a duplicate of that machlekes regarding an ordinary loan. It's the same idea, the same concept, the same underlying machlekes. There's a slight difference, and there's a point of bringing out both scenarios to bring out the chiddush in both cases. Tzricha, di itmar baha. If we only discussed our case of the carbon, I would think like this. No, just the opposite. If we only discussed the case of the loan, I would think Baha Ka'amar Shmuel. It makes sense that in that case Shmuel maintains that there's no shibud min haTorah on one's nechasim. Well, he himself personally has to repay it. There's no question about that. We're talking about the shibud on the nechasim. Mishum delay milva kseva b'Torah, because it's not a commitment. It's not a milva. There's no Torah obligation to repay this loan, meaning, of course, Tesis points out, of course you have to repay your loans. That's not up for discussion. It just means to say that the Torah doesn't explicitly order you to pay it back, because it's so simple that you have to pay it back. Right? So there, perhaps, it doesn't trigger a shibud on his nechasim. It's not a Torah obligation. But in our case of the carbon, That is a Torah mandated obligation. Perhaps everybody would agree to Rabbi Yehuda Kessler that the shibud extends to one's assets. So even if the Isha passed away, the kids have to fill in for her. And that's why we mention our case to say no. Even by the Karban, according to Shmuel, there is no shibud. Had we only discussed the case of Karban, I would say Baha, Kam Rabbi Yechanan. Perhaps it's only over here that Rabbi Yechanan maintains there is a shibud that extends to her properties. The milva kesuva b'Torah, because an obligation which is mandated by the Torah, such as bringing a Karban, kiksuva b'shtar damya, is treated like a milva b'shtar, which certainly triggers that lien and obligates one's properties, as we mentioned before, because he's willingly submitting to that. So perhaps a milva kesuva b'Torah has that power as well to bind his properties. But in an ordinary case of a milva al peh, where you just borrowed $100 from your friend and it's undocumented and it's undrafted, unwritten, perhaps everybody agrees to Shmuel, even Rabbi Yehuda would agree to Shmuel, there is no shibud chal on the nechas and tzricha. That's why we mentioned both. That pretty much highlights each one's chiddush in either case, right? Even in a milva aksuva b'Torah, there's a shita which says there is no shibud on the nechasim. And even in a milva al peh, there's a shita which says there is a shibud on the nechasim, because shibud the dayraisa. So what's the conclusion? Amar Papa Hilchasa, the conclusion is like this: shibud the is dayraisa. Milva al peh, even a milva al peh, goyvim and hayorshin. So if one borrows and passes away, the yorshim have to pay. V'einoi goyvim and alakuchis, but does not affect a buyer who bought his property from this loiva post-loan. You know why? Goyvim and hayorshin, he has a right to go to the yorshim who inherited the assets. Shibud dayraisa, because min haTorah his assets are bound. But ve'einoi goyvim and alakuchis, but he can't go to the lakuchis who purchased properties from this fellow after he took the loan. You know why? They're less like color. It isn't public knowledge. It doesn't get publicized unless we have a star and there are Edom who go and spread the news. Otherwise, how can you expect everybody to know about every loan that he took in private? So Rashi explains, so although Minat Torah really, there was a fundamental shibud on all his nechasim, even a milva peh triggers that shibud, but the Chachamim canceled it for the sake of protecting a potential buyer. And the fact that he allowed the loiva to borrow in an undocumented fashion is pretty much a relinquishing of his claim on the other fellow's assets. Okay, so after Ravasi's passing, he sat down to compile his lessons. We have 1, we have 2, and finally we have the halacha of shibuda da'iraisa, which is the final halacha. Okay, now back to the Mishnah. We know the 3 methods of acquiring an Isha, Keser, Shtar, and Bia, and according to Rav Huna we have a 4th, right? Chuppah, but not Chalipin. What about on her way out? How does she disengage? V'koyna is atzma beget, ubemisas habal. She can reacquire her independent identity by one of 2 ways: either a get, a divorce document, or her husband's passing. Now, we assume that it's simple logic. No husband, no marriage. It's not so simple. Says the Gemara Bishleim get. You understand how a get works, why it works. Pretty clear that a get affects a divorce. How do we know that upon her husband's passing, the marriage is terminated? Well, says the Gemara, Svarhu. It's plain common sense. Hu asara, hu sharasa. He bound her. He's unbinding her. She was bound to him during his lifetime. That created the Isser. Remember, Kiddushin, as we learned back in DAF Beis, means Asra Akula Al Makehegdish. It creates that exclusivity between husband and wife. You're mine and no one else's. So once that's over, once he's not here, he's unbinding her. That is matter, her to all else. Says the Gemara, it's not so simple. V'ha'arayis. You know, there are many marriage-related arayis. Rashi brings a couple here. Let's say Ashes Achi Aviv, right? So let's say his father's brother's wife. Why is she usher? Because of the Kiddushin, because she was married to his father's brother. Let's say his father's brother passes away. She still stays usher It's a permanent Isser. There you go. Even though her Isser was triggered by her marriage to this fellow's relative, his fellow's uncle, the Isser becomes inherent, it becomes permanent, and is not dependent upon the duration of that marriage. The husband makes her Asr upon his marriage to her, but doesn't make her Mutter upon his departure. Once she gets that label, right, I am his wife, that stays. So back to our question. How do we know that when a husband passes away, she's Mutter to marry? So let's take a look at this. The Yivama, right? Her husband passes away without children, right? She cannot marry anybody. She has to wait for the brother of her husband to do Yivam. The Yivama she'ein labanim asura, to marry anybody. Let's make a diuk. Apparently, hoyesh labanim. Suppose she has kids. Mutar, she can marry anybody she wants. So the fact that Torah restricts her when she has no kids indicates that otherwise she has no restrictions. 1 second. V'dilma ein labanim asura la'alma. Perhaps let's twist it a bit differently. When there are no kids, so she cannot marry anybody. V'shari liyavam, she's designated for the yavam. V'yesh labanim, but suppose she has kids, maybe she's also to everybody. L'kuli alma nami asura. She's also to anybody. Ella, rather like this. Midam rachmana almana l'kayin gadol asura. Torah tells us that a widow cannot marry a kayin gadol. What does that tell us about her ability to marry anybody else? Ha l'kayin headed shari. Apparently she can marry an ordinary kayin and certainly a Yisrael or a Levi. That's a right, that an almana is mutter. How do you know? V'dilma l'kayin gadol b'lav. Maybe. She's also to anybody. For a kayin gadol there's a lav. L'kuli alma b'aseh, but regarding marrying anybody else, she's also asur. There's an isur asay. Rashi says, what's the asay? Because the pasuk speaks about v'shilcha, right? Divorcing an isha. V'shilcha mi beisa v'yotza v'holcha v'lish acher. V'hoisa lish acher. So when you divorce, she can go marry a second person. V'shilcha says only through sending her away with a get. Only this manner allows her to marry. But through passing away, that's not matter. So she's being over an asay if she proceeds to marry somebody after her husband's passing. Maybe. Well, hi asay my vidate. Whoa, what room is there for an asay? What's going on here? Ida ahanya misas habal, if her husband's passing benefited her, meaning it changed her status and was matir her, tishtri legarbi, so then she should be totally permissible, totally mutter. So it's either or, either all or nothing. Ida ahanya misas habal, if her husband's passing did not affect, did not change her status, then back to square one. Tukma b'milsa kamaisa. Let's assume that she retains her earlier status. She's still asr b'karis, like an Eshes Ish. There's no need for a Torah to say that she can't marry a Kohen Gadol. She's an Eshes Ish. She's karis. Meaning, the Gemara finds it a bit difficult to submit to this, middle stage. Either she's in or she's out. Either she's totally mutter or totally asr. Says the Gemara, no. We do find a precedent for such an in-between status. Alamalai, why not? Afikta misa v'kimta lasei. The misa sabal removed the chi of misa from the isha, but she still has a chi of asei, not to marry anybody. Where do we find such a concept? Midadav psula mikdash. Take a look at the carbon, which became blemished or whatever, right? So it's puzzle and not fit for hakrava. What are you meant to do with the carbon? You're meant to go be paid to the carbon, redeem it, and then it's mutter. So right now it's sort of in a state of limbo. The mikara isbu meila. Initially, before you redeemed it, if one uses it, he has committed meila. He has diverted hegdish property, right? With all its consequences. You can't share it, you can't work with it. But once it's redeemed, it changes status slightly. There's no more me'ila applicable, but begiz v'avodah asiri still. You can't fully enjoy the animal like an ordinary animal. You can't share it, you can't work with it. So there are restrictions. It still retains some of its former identity. Perhaps that's the same thing that happens when the Baal dies. She retains something of her former identity. There's no misa consequence upon interacting with her, but there perhaps is an Isra say. So we have to look for another source that Mrs. Habal is matadish. Ela med Amar Achmon. The pasuk says this newlywed shouldn't join the war. Pen Yamas, but Muhammad might pass away. And another man would marry her. Pretty clear that you can marry a widow. Maske flor of Shisha bid Ravidi Avakash. Ema perhaps will say man achar. Who's this achar? That her is being matter. Maybe he's the yavam. Oh, he passed away. There were no kids. The brother is taking over, but otherwise she's not mutter to anybody. Amar of Ashi, shtei chuvis pedavar. I have two responses to this challenge. Chada, number one, the yavam fellow is very close to home. He's a brother. Leikra achar. Torah would not refer to him as an achar, a stranger. So it can't be a reference to the yavam. But another question. Ksiv. You know, in the parsha of Kiddushin, the pasuk says you marry the isha, right? And if he chooses to divorce, she goes and marries another fellow, her second marriage. And suppose it doesn't work out, right? He dislikes her because of Sevik Christus. He writes a get. Or option number two is he passes away. Right? So the Torah makes a double reference. We discuss both options. The iskish misal gerish, that allows us to connect, to equate one to the other. Ma gerish and shayiv gemeres, just like a get, is a complete cutoff. It's totally mata the isha, there's no question about that, as we discussed before. Likewise, af misa, if husband passes on, shayiv gemeres, it affects a complete heter, and she's free to marry as she chooses. Okay, let's briefly review today's daf. We discussed a situation where a fellow snatched something and gave it back to the Isha L'Shem KIDDUSHIN. Well, the Gemara says it depends. If there was prior discussion about this upcoming ceremony, this upcoming KIDDUSHIN, even though it was her item, if she took it b'shtika, then she's a willing partner, she's moichel him, even though she expected perhaps a nicer ring, but for the time being this is okay, and it is considered a proper kiddushin. But if there was no shadach, there was no prior discussion, it just came as a surprise, shtika is basically just a silent protest. Look, sure I took it, but it was mine. Ravasi taught us many things. Amongst them we have the halacha that shavar pruta is the minimum value. Either a coin or something the equivalent of a shavar pruta is the minimum for the kedusha isha and purchasing of karka. We learned about the detriments of being involved in Gittin Kedushin without proper expertise and knowledge. We learned about Shibuda Dairaisa, and we learned about the Makar, that Mrs. Habal and Get are Mata the Isha. Surah Tevez, all the best to you and Atzlacha Rab.